And here we are in Module 3, Understanding Culture and Understanding Your Students. We cannot escape culture. Culture shapes our perspective on the world and our expectations of how people should act. Language, culture, and communication are always intertwined as you consider what is appropriate to say, how to say it, and when it's best not to say anything at all. Working with ESL students involves a constant process of negotiating both language and culture, and your understanding of how we learn another language may not match what your students expect. But help is at hand. In this unit, we'll start with a reflection that asks, do you match the stereotype of a typical American? Then we'll outline the stages of acculturation, so you can see whether your student is still in the honeymoon period or suffering from culture shock. Next, you'll see a video of students helping each other deal with acculturation problems. And as always, we'll have a great many tips on how you can teach cultural differences and how you can teach a bit of US culture.
Here is a quick overview of our module on culture. The tips for tutors include suggestions on how to deal with sensitive cultural issues. It's very challenging to talk about cultural and cultural characteristics without running into the issue of cultural stereotypes. So let's start this module right in the thick of it. For the student you tutor, you may represent America. But are you really a typical American? Your students may come to you with a preconceived notion about Americans. These notions are often stereotypes acquired from TV and the movies, and may or may not apply to you. What would you tell your student about the people in this picture? Are they typical Americans? And are you? Go ahead and pause the next slide so you can decide how typical you are compared to popular stereotypes the world over. And if you don't typify US culture, perhaps the students you tutor don't represent their communities 100% either. Talking with a student about her views of Americans can be a starting point for discussing culture and diversity here and abroad. Let's start with a reflection to find out how typical you are. Go ahead and pause the next slide and then consider the issue. Look at these statements and decide, is this something that totally applies to me, sort of describes me, or does not apply to me at all? This may be a really good section to discuss with other teachers and compare notes. Pause the slide and think about the images you have of different groups. You may have some hidden stereotypes that you're not even aware of. What about others in the community? Are there certain biases that you have encountered when you listen to people talk? What ideas do you and your friends have for countering biases against certain groups? The iceberg has become an iconic image representing what we can observe and what lies beneath. Much of culture is invisible, but may still be deeply ingrained in a person. Even your student may not be able to tell you in great detail how everything works in the home culture. There are just too many aspects of culture to ever fully understand all the values, attitudes, and priorities. Consider sharing this visual with your student. It can help reassure her that U.S. culture will reveal itself over time. The trick is to be curious, observe and ask questions, and find someone you trust who can serve as a cultural interpreter. And that person may just be you. Have you ever lived in a place that was very different from where you grew up? How did you feel at first? And how did your feelings change over time? Linguists and anthropologists have identified different stages of acculturation. These are, of course, not predetermined and may overlap. A student may go back and forth between the stages. Next, you will see a very popular chart that shows a common progression of cultural adjustment. Do these phases make sense to you as you reflect on your own experience? Is there a stage missing, perhaps? When you look back at living in a different place, which stage sticks most vividly in your mind? The chart is quite detailed, so pause the video when the slide comes up so you can take it all in. Remember that you can also print out the slides from the Tutoring 1-to-1 PowerPoint on the English Forward website. As you think about the students you have taught, does anyone come to mind whose outlook and actions exemplified a particular phase? Pause the slide and consider the characteristics of each phase. In phase 1, everything is new and shiny and there is lots of excitement. In phase 2, the reality sets in that you are no longer at home and may feel lost. You may even be angry. In phase 3, you make peace with the fact that things work differently, but you are no longer bothered by them as much as you were before. Phase 4 is difficult, as you wonder if you made the right decision. Phase 5 is the stage we all hope to get to, being at peace in a new environment. As you work with refugees and immigrants who have difficult lives, you may notice that many may never get to phase 5, and you may need to identify outside resources to help them. Talking with your colleagues about these issues might help as well. These would be good questions to discuss with friends and fellow teachers, don't you think? Cultural adjustment is difficult in the best of times. It can be especially stressful for immigrants and refugees who live challenging lives. Lives that make it difficult to attend school regularly and to focus on learning. Thousands of English learners have lived through violence, civil strife, and war, and had to leave everything they had behind. Being uprooted, voluntarily or forced, causes disruption and mental upheaval. The difficulties that many students have experienced shape how much and how quickly they can learn. Often, the best a tutor can do is to be sensitive to examples or images that may trigger anxiety and fear. If you do have students who seem very stressed and anxious, it's a good idea to have a list of community resources, including counseling, that may be available in case issues arise or questions come up that you don't feel confident handling. But one of the best strategies might be to put students in contact with others who have similar backgrounds so they can support each other. Do you have any ideas on how you might do that? This video shows learners in Chicago who were in a program that discussed scenarios. Students were asked to brainstorm and come up with ideas on how they might address different cultural issues that were associated with being uprooted and in a new country.
The lonely neighbor.
She's from another country, speaks a little bit of English, and she's your neighbor. What will you do? What will you say?
In this situation, I will call my friend. I call her, him. Don't worry. Don't worry. We too don't speak English very well. Don't worry.
I made coffee, special coffee, Bosnia coffee. If you have time, you come on my home and talking about your problem, why you are looking sad, very sad, and I think I will be helpful for her.
I could tell her not be so frustrated, not be so be alone. Please, we can go together into the park, outside. Please come to our English class. We have one good teacher, good students. We will study together English. We will communicate, and you will be not alone. And you will improve your English. You will be happy. You will be not so depressed and nervous.
This scenario is a bit longer, but well worth watching all the way through for the very sweet ending. An older man from the Philippines has his Medicaid cut off and can't afford the heart medication that he needs. Watch how the other students respond. What ways can you see to adapt these kinds of scenarios to working with a single student? And what would you do to connect the student who is lonely and depressed to others? What community-based organizations are in your community that can help students with problems?
A real-life problem. We ask students to talk about problems they have had and to give advice to others. Here is one story.
I received a letter from the public aid that they will discontinue my food stamp and my Medicare. They find the records that I have a house in the city of Manila that I gave to my daughter, two daughters.
Oh.
And they're asking me if they paid to me or not. I answered them that in the tradition, in the Filipino costume, if a father or the mother had a property and give to their son or daughter, there is no payment. I am sorry for that matter because I am very sick man. I have many medicine, and afterwards they will not now pay my medicine if they stop at my public aid. 10 kind of medicine every day. 4 in the morning and 5 and 4 in the afternoon PM. Where shall I get the pay? I have no work. I have no job. I am too old. I am too old.
Have health.
85 years old.
Health. It is problem, big problem.
Please pray for me to get my...
What can we do to help him? What advice do we have? What do you recommend, Phil? And what you should do? So you can share something with Phil. What should we do?
I think he must go to lawyer.
I think the first time maybe he has to apply to our caseworker. with old people, Haggerty. And at the same time, he has to go to the maybe to Philippine American Association here across the street, and maybe they have an independent free lawyer, and they could help him because they know Filipinian customs, because that father or mother don't receive money from their children for the property.
Yeah, they will put paper here and write, please help me, I have heart problem. I going to the city hall and lawyer, no.
You know this procedure of
My
the...
demonstration. Springfield, and face on the door. Please help me, I have heart problem. Lest hope so. Isn't God? God help me. I have heart problem. I pray in church. I sing.
Thank you, my two teachers, and to my beloved classmate for the advice to me. And now I learn very much for their way. And now I love you and you love me. God bless us. Thank you very much.
Next, we will offer ideas on how to address cultural issues and teach a student about U.S. culture. Oh, and a quick aside. You may notice that English Forward does not use the term, quote, America a lot. Instead, we tend to say United States. This is simply an acknowledgement that there are several Americas, North America, as well as Central America and South America. We just can't claim it all. Here are some strategies for offering support to a student who faces problems, emotional, social, or financial. It's important to remember that you don't have to do it all alone. One of the best ways to introduce culture is to take a cross-cultural perspective. Share information about U.S. culture and invite your student to tell you more about his home culture. A one-to-one session is the perfect setting for both of you to learn more about what it's like to live in a different place and feel uprooted and lonely at times. As always, the most important strategy may be to listen carefully, get to know your student, and be sensitive to different emotional cues. Invite the student to talk and share experiences and feelings. Say, tell me more, but don't pry. Here are some ideas for teaching culture by taking a cross-cultural perspective. On the right, you'll see an example of starting with a safe topic, holidays and celebrations. Addressing cultural differences is complicated. Cultural views and practices are often deeply ingrained and don't change easily. But becoming aware of what some of these differences are is an important first step. In this section, we'll address some of the sensitive issues, including your students' expectation of school and differences in touching, eye contact, and tone of voice. After all, you don't want your student to get into trouble inadvertently because she's not aware of what signals she might be sending. If she wants to change, it's of course entirely up to her. So tread lightly. The student you tutor may have definite expectations of school and how a teacher should act and what a student should do. Here are some ideas on what to do if the expectations don't match. Go ahead and pause the slide and consider the ideas. Discuss them with others. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do they match your experience? Do you have other ideas that you might want to try out? Boy, using the different tone of voice can really get you in trouble. The wrong tone can mark you as rude and uncooperative and can really upset other people. So go ahead, look at the slide in detail and try to remember some of your own experiences when you or somebody else may have used the wrong tone. What was your reaction? What happens when your teenage children use the wrong tone with you? What is your response? It can be fun to help your students develop tone awareness and become aware of the different signals, different tones of voice sent to other people. Help them figure out the differences by giving examples and let them hear the difference between, excuse me, and, well, excuse me, or the difference between, may I help you, and may I help you, or, I'm sorry, do you have any idea what time it is? And do you have any idea what time it is? Here is just a quick reminder of some of the key points as you try to teach culture and understand your students better. We leave you with a variety of resources, including guides and a book of photographs to use in your tutoring. We have included an important article by Janet Isserles on being sensitive to trauma when teaching ESL, and a book by Jenny Horsman that explores these issues more deeply. We also list some book-length exploration of what it means to be a refugee in U.S. society.